Hello everyone, and welcome back to the next installment of our 10.2 raid guides, proudly presented by Kingston FURY. This is Crazypuck from Method, and today we'll show you how to defeat Tindral in heroic Amirdrassil. Please keep in mind everything in this video is from PTR testing, and it's possible Blizzard altered the encounter in some way since the last testing. If that happens, we'll release an updated video after the fights are live. Tindral is a 3-phase encounter with 2 intermissions between. Tindral himself is a fire druid, and you'll fight his humanoid form, his boomkin form, and his treant form throughout the fight. Both intermissions are essentially the same. You get the dragonfly to follow Tindral to the next platform. Each of his forms has its own set of abilities, and they'll stay consistent across phases. Let's jump right in. First off, throughout the entire fight, if you get too close to the edge of the platform, Tindral will blast you with Flame Surge, dealing massive damage every second. This one's really easy, just don't get too close to the edge. While Tindral is in his humanoid form, he's got a lot of mechanics to throw at you. He'll periodically cast Falling Stars, putting large blue circles around several random players. After a few seconds, the circles explode, dealing moderate damage to anyone hit. This will then cause a bunch of blue swirlies to spawn on the platform. Don't stand in the swirlies. Mass Entanglement puts a small circle around every player for 8 seconds. When this expires, the circles explode for mild damage, so you don't want to be standing in anybody else's circle. This will also cause vines to spawn under each player, rooting them in place. The vines themselves are attackable and persist until you kill them, so all DPS should swap immediately and blast them. By the way, you can actually get rid of these vines by using like a Blessing of Freedom too. Tindral will periodically debuff a few players with Fiery Growth, a 20-second dot that can be dispelled. When this debuff is removed, whether from expiring or just you dispelling it, a fire puddle called Scorching Ground will spawn at that location, dealing heavy damage to anyone who stands in it. Like always, don't stand in the fire. The last 2 mechanics during the humanoid phase are both tank ones. Searing Wrath is a debuff applied by Tindral's melee swings, applying stacks of a fire dot that last 20 seconds. You'll need to tank swap periodically if stacks get too high. The second tank mechanic is called Blazing Mushrooms, where Tindral will put down a mushroom near him every 3 seconds for 9 seconds. The mushrooms themselves last for 3 seconds, then explode within a small circle. If you're inside that small circle when it explodes, it'll deal heavy physical and fire damage to you, and cause you to take 500% increased damage from other mushrooms for 3 seconds. However, if a mushroom goes off without being soaked, it'll instead deal massive raid-wide damage, so they do need to be soaked. You'll want your tanks to do the soaking for the mushrooms, and they need to alternate for each one. Never soak 2 in a row, you'll just die. In his boomkin form, Tindral gets a couple of new abilities. He'll regularly cast Sunflame, doing mild raid-wide damage just to keep the healers from getting bored. He'll also cast Firebeam, putting down 2 large red swirlies on the platform. After a few seconds, each swirly will put out some giant fire lasers that move across the platform. These hurt a lot. Do not eat the fire lasers. In his treant form, Tindral gets 2 new mechanics. Suppressive Ember puts small healing absorb shields on random players, but this can actually stack, so healers will need to ensure that they're blasting this off as fast as possible. The second new ability seems to have changed a bit since PTR. At least the name did, because it's now called Flaming Germination, and it's now a 15-second channel up from 10 seconds. During this channel, it'll deal raid-wide damage every second. On PTR, it also spawned a whole bunch of little red swirlies that hurt if you stood in them, and then the swirlies spawn these Seeds of Flames. The seeds are definitely still here on live, and they'll appear on the ground and last about 10 seconds. After that time, they turn into a flaming tree, dealing heavy ticking fire damage to the raid every 2 seconds for the duration of the phase. Fortunately, if you step on the seeds, it'll destroy them. Stepping on the seeds deals mild fire damage to you, and increases damage taken from stepping on other seeds by 50% for 6 seconds, stacking. Basically, don't stand in the bad things and then stomp on the seeds. Make sure you don't do too many in a row, or the damage increase debuff will just kind of annihilate you. Do like 2 or 3, let the debuff drop, and then do a few more. If you have immunities or something, you can use that here for this. And that's really pretty much it for mechanics for this fight outside of the intermission, so let's get into how each phase actually plays out. Each of the phases is very heavily scripted and cycles through the same progression of abilities each time. In phase 1, Tindral swaps between his humanoid and boomkin forms. Tindral starts the fight by casting Falling Stars. Targeted players need to move away and everyone dodges the swirlies. Next up is a Mass Entanglement. For this, you'll want to get as close to each other as possible without being in someone else's circle to make cleave and AoE more effective to destroy the roots as fast as you can. As soon as the roots do come out, you'll also get blazing mushrooms, so the tanks need to ensure that they soak these and alternate which one they're soaking. While the tanks are dealing with those mushrooms, you'll get a set of fiery growth debuffs. The affected players just need to head towards the edge of the platform, but make sure you don't go so far that you trigger the flame surge. Following the growths, Tindral will swap into Boomkin form, cast Sunbeam a couple of times on the raid, and then cast Firebeam, dodge the swirlies, and dodge the lasers. From here, he goes back to humanoid form and repeats everything in exactly the same order a second time. After the second Boomkin form casts Firebeam, the boss turns into a Fire Owl, and this starts the first intermission. He'll fly up above the platform and cast Typhoon, pushing everybody back for 2.5 seconds and then dealing moderate raid-wide damage. He'll then drop a whole bunch of feathers on the ground. Clicking one of these feathers allows you to hop on your dragon riding mount and follow him to the next platform. While you're flying behind him to get to the next platform, there will be some small green orbs in the air called Dream Essences and a whole bunch of fire orbs called Scorching Plumes. Flying through the green orbs will buff the entire raid, increasing damage, healing, and absorb effects by 5% per stack. It'll also leave behind one of those speed boost swirls that you know from dragon riding races. This time it'll be called an Emerald Gale, and the added bonus here is if you hit an Emerald Gale, it gives you an extra 3 vigor. However, if you fly into any of the fire orbs, those will deal mild damage to you and remove 3 vigor. Avoid the fire orbs and hit as many green orbs as you possibly can. Once you land on the new platform, Tindral will start casting Supernova. Here, he bubbles himself for 5% of his health for 20 seconds, dealing heavy raid-wide ticking damage. If you don't break the bubble within the 20 seconds, the raid wipes. You'll need to nuke him to break the shield, which is why hitting those green orbs is vital. If you get a 10 stack of that buff, you're doing 50% increased damage for the entire raid, which makes the shield actually doable. Once the shield pops, Phase 2 starts. Here, the boss swaps between his humanoid and Treant forms. Phase 2 is purely scripted just like Phase 1, but with a different order of abilities. You'll start with Mass Entanglement, followed closely by Falling Stars. This is actually a pretty dangerous overlap, so you'll want your range to spread out going into the vines, and use a Blessing of Freedom on anyone who gets Falling Stars and needs help moving away. After this, you'll get Mushrooms and Fiery Growth, and then the boss swaps to Treant form. You'll get a cast of Flaming Germination, so make sure you stomp out all of the seeds. Do not miss any, those trees really hurt. This entire set of mechanics will then repeat a second time, and again, the boss will turn into an owl and fly away and put you into the second intermission. The second intermission is basically the exact same thing as the first, so click on a feather, jump on your mount, and follow the boss. Like before, it's extremely important to get the green orbs, as the boss will begin casting Supernova again once you land on the third platform. Now, whereas Phase 1 and 2 are honestly kind of slower paced and really meant to introduce you to all of the abilities, Phase 3 just wants to blow your face up. Tindral will swap between all 3 forms, and there's a whole bunch of bad overlaps during this phase. We recommend popping Bloodlust as soon as the Supernova shield falls. Tindral starts as his humanoid form, tossing out Fiery Growth debuffs, spawning Mushrooms, and casting Entangling Roots overlapping with a Falling Stars cast. From here on out, he'll pop from humanoid to Boomkin to Treant and back to humanoid form. A couple things to note for Phase 3. When the boss casts the Boomkin Fire Beams, it'll actually create the lasers twice from each cast. Also, every time the boss casts Entangling Roots in Phase 3, it is overlapping with another mechanic. The first cast overlaps with stars, the second also overlaps with stars, the third overlaps with both fire lasers and falling stars, and the fourth cast overlaps with Fiery Growth, which is really dangerous. Make sure on the third one you break out as soon as possible so you can dodge the fire lasers and not get burnt, and make sure on the fourth one you break out the targets with Fiery Growth first, or just use a Blessing of Freedom on them or something. The last thing to note is on PTR, the fight has what's basically an enrage timer at 8 minutes and 30 seconds in. At that point, the boss starts casting Supernova, which you will not be able to break without the damage buffs from the intermission. You need to kill this boss before that point, or you lose. If you enjoyed this guide, remember to like it and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to catch all of our previews, guides, kill videos, and more. A big thank you again to Kingston FURY for making guides like these possible. From everyone here at Method, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.